Using components with known vulnerabilities. This is another very big but somewhat older topic, and that's because we've been using shared components, reusable components in our systems for a long time now. In the web world especially, sharing components is really natural because everybody's really trying to solve somewhat of the same problem. We're trying to present some sort of a website or a web page to a user, and we're trying to get some input from them and kind of have that cycle of input and output, and using the same technologies at the end. We're using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We're communicating over HTTP. That's really the majority use case. And so there's a lot of components that can capture some of the kind of behavior that we're looking to reproduce, suppose rendering HTML or scraping HTML, or doing something with images, manipulating images, or any of the formats that are related to the web. Or, there's so much, like parsing URLs. There's so much that is really common to what we are working with in the web applications. And so a lot of our applications have several components, and that's really where the vulnerabilities of these components can affect a lot of us at the same time. And one of the ways that we can get bitten by this is if we don't update our dependencies regularly. And what happens is, suppose you follow a couple of versions behind in some popular library, and turns out that somebody's figured out how to hack into a website that has a particular library that it's using. Suppose like it's some JavaScript library that everybody in the world uses, and then if you are one of the few people that never updated to version 3 from version 2 or something like that, you are now vulnerable because version 2 has a bug, a security issue. And then if you never got version 2.2 or whatever the security patch was, your website, just by virtue of using that insecure and bug-prone version of the JavaScript, is now vulnerable as well. And so that's one way that we can really get targeted for opportunistic attacks. And opportunistic attacks means that, there's systems out there, usually just automated systems. We've talked about botnets. It could be botnets. It could be just corrupted versions of security scanner tools. There's so much automation that is possible nowadays on especially public-facing infrastructure, that there's somebody who's looking through all the stuff that's out there on the web and just poking at things. It's really like running through a neighborhood and just jiggling all the doorknobs, right? Just seeing which door might be open or which window is cracked open, where can somebody get in. And, certain insecure components, vulnerable components, they can have certain signatures. And we talked about web reconnaissance before. So somebody can catalog a list of all the sites that might be using an old version of PHP or an old version of Rails or an old version of JSP, or really anything that might have known security vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities that allow somebody to take over a system or to expose sensitive information. And then these systems, just by virtue of having those components, will come under attack. And that's just because they were there. They were susceptible, so they get attacked, no matter how valuable or invaluable their data might be or the property itself might be. And the other thing is sometimes there's a restriction on really what kind of components somebody can use. And suppose you have 5 different components that you're using in your web application, and because you're on version 3 of a certain framework, you can't use version 4 of another component, right? So this happens sometimes in the Rails world. It happens with Python, any of the Python frameworks for web. It happens in PHP, but in PHP there's usually a bit less of this going on because, again, as I said before, so many people just hand code their own stuff in PHP and don't even necessarily structure their application to use components. But in PHP, there's there's a version of this, which is that a lot of people use scripts that they find on the internet, and they don't always know whether those scripts that they can include, whether those scripts are secure or not. And so everybody has the same issue where you might have different versions of things incompatible with each other, so you stick with an insecure version because you can't upgrade to the next version of something.